January 28, 1978. Federal Courthouse, Manhattan. Leroy, Nicky Barnes sits in a wooden chair wearing a tailored three-piece suit, a silk tie knotted perfect, hands folded like a man waiting for a business meeting. The jury foreman stands. Guilty. Life without parole. He is the most powerful black drug lord in American history, the man who built a heroin empire worth hundreds of millions, who organized Harlem's chaos into a corporate machine, who smiled on the cover of a national magazine and dared the government to touch him. He has just become federal property. 7 months earlier, he posed for that cover in a denim suit, a red, white, and blue tie. The headline screaming what everyone already knew, Mr. Untouchable. Now he is prisoner 00378054. Within a few years of his 1978 conviction, Barnes began setting in motion the most devastating act of revenge the drug game had seen. He will destroy everything he created. Every partner, every lieutenant, every dollar. 109 names on a list, handed to the same government that locked him up. Here is how it went down. Harlem, 1933. Leroy Nicholas Barnes entered the world on 147th Street, a stretch of pavement that would later run red with the product he pushed. His father worked odd jobs. His mother cleaned houses. Nothing special about the Barnes household, nothing that screamed future Kingpin. Just another black family in the Depression era, New York, trying to survive on scraps and prayer. Young Nicky ran the streets early, not because he was bad, because he was bored. School could not hold him. The classroom felt like a cage while the block outside hummed with action. By his teenage years, he was already drifting toward the corners where the real education happened. Small-time hustles, numbers running, the usual apprenticeship for any kid who wanted more than a factory job in a rented room. But here's what separated Nicky from the other corner boys. He watched. While others were fighting over scraps, throwing punches over insults, bleeding for nothing, Barnes was studying. How did money move? Who controlled territory? Why did some dealers last and others disappear? He filed it all away, building a mental database that would later become the blueprint for an empire. The 1960s brought heroin to Harlem like a flood. Junkies multiplying on every corner, dealers stepping on each other's turf, bodies dropping over $50 disputes. The trade was chaos. Pure unorganized violence, no structure, no hierarchy, just 100 small-time hustlers fighting over the same desperate customers. Barnes saw opportunity where others saw only danger, but first, he needed an education, a federal penitentiary. During a stint in federal prison in the mid-1960s, Barnes encountered members of organized crime and absorbed lessons about hierarchy and discipline that would shape his later business model. The Italians explained how La Cosa Nostra operated. The hierarchy, boss at the top, underboss below him, captains running crews, soldiers doing the work. Everything flowing upward like a pyramid. Disputes handled at sit-downs, not shootouts. Territory divided by agreement, not warfare. Profits shared according to rank. They described something Barnes had never seen on the streets of Harlem. Organization. The Mafia did not fight over corners because they owned the whole neighborhood. They did not kill over insults because insults were handled through channels. They built enterprises that lasted generations while street dealers burned out in months. Barnes absorbed every word. The Italian blueprint was not just about crime, it was about business, structure, discipline, respect, the things that separated empires from gangs. When Barnes walked out of prison, he carried something more valuable than any stash of heroin. He carried a vision. Back in Harlem, 1967, Barnes starts small, moving weight through trusted associates, testing his theories. The first thing he does differently is he stops fighting, not because he is soft, because he is calculated. When a rival moves on his territory, Barnes does not retaliate with bullets. He invites the man to talk. He proposes a split. He offers terms that benefit both parties. The rival, confused by this approach, agrees. Word spreads. Nicky Barnes does not beef. Nicky Barnes negotiates. Within 2 years, Barnes has assembled something Harlem has never seen. 7 men, the most powerful independent heroin dealers in the neighborhood, each one controlling their own territory, each one making real money. each one tired of the constant warfare that ate into profits. Barnes brings them together with a proposition. Stop competing, start cooperating, form a council. The council, that is what they called themselves, not a gang, not a crew. A board of directors. Barnes is chairman, Guy Fisher, Frank James, Wally Rice, Thomas Foreman, Ishmael Muhammad, Joseph Jazz Hayden. 7 kings sitting at one table. The structure was elegant. Each member maintained their own operation, their own workers, their own territory, but disputes between members went to the council. A majority vote decided outcomes. Disobedience meant death, not sudden violence in the heat of the moment, calculated execution, business decisions. The Italian model translated to Black Harlem. Barnes had taken those lessons and built something unprecedented. A narcotics corporation with defined territories, quality control, profit sharing, and conflict resolution. While other dealers were dying over corners, the council was holding meetings, discussing supply chains, negotiating prices with the Italian wholesalers, standardizing product quality, quality control. That was Barnes being Barnes. Most dealers cut their heroin until it was barely active. They stepped on it so many times addicts needed triple doses to feel anything. Barnes went the opposite direction. He hired testers, chemists who could verify purity. The council's product hit the streets with consistent potency. Brands emerged, specific stamps marking specific batches. Junkies knew that council dope was reliable. They would walk past 3 dealers to buy from a council corner. Brand loyalty in the heroin game. Barnes had invented it. The money started flowing like nothing Harlem had ever seen. By the early 1970s, the council controlled an estimated 80% of the heroin trade in Harlem. That was not a neighborhood operation. That was a monopoly. Single shipments worth millions moved through the pipeline. Barnes himself later estimated his personal net worth at the peak around $75 million. Adjusted for inflation, that was $500 million in today's money. From a kid on 147th Street to 9-figure wealth in less than a decade. But Barnes didn't move in silence. That wasn't his style. The man understood something about power that most kingpins miss. Visibility is protection. The community that loved you wouldn't snitch on you. The cops that couldn't catch you looked foolish. The rivals that feared you stayed in their lane. So Nicky Barnes became a spectacle. The wardrobe alone was legendary. 300 suits hanging in his closets. Custom-made Italian fabrics, every color imaginable. He changed outfits 3 times a day. Cashmere coats for winter, silk shirts in summer, diamond rings on every finger, gold bracelets stacked to the elbow, the famous end medallion hanging from a chain thick enough to anchor a boat. He drove a fleet of foreign cars, Mercedes, Maserati, Citroen, different vehicle for different days, different moods. The license plate on one read Untouchable, not a nickname given by the streets, a title he gave himself. The social calendar matched the wardrobe. He maintained close ties to Harlem's nightlife and entertainers, appearing at high-profile shows and social events tied to venues like the Apollo. He threw parties that shut down city blocks. Celebrities showed up, athletes, musicians. Everyone wanted to be seen with Nicky. He walked through Harlem like a politician on the campaign trail, shaking hands, remembering names, handing out cash to kids. Turkeys at Thanksgiving, toys at Christmas. The Robin Hood routine executed flawlessly. Half the neighborhood was on his payroll directly. The other half was on his payroll indirectly. Store owners who looked the other way, beat cops who took envelopes, social workers who kept quiet. Barnes had built a community around himself, a constituency. They weren't going to help the government take down the man who paid for funerals and kept the lights on. The Thunderbirds, that's what they called his security detail. A rotating crew of armed men who moved with Barnes like Secret Service protecting a president. They'd sweep locations before he arrived, check vehicles for tampering, screen visitors. The operation was professional, military almost. Barnes didn't trust easily. Paranoia is a job requirement when you're moving that much weight, but within his inner circle he projected absolute confidence. The boss who had everything under control, and for years he did. The New York Police Department couldn't touch him. Arrests would come and charges would evaporate. Witnesses would recant. Evidence would disappear. Barnes beat case after case, the Teflon Don before Gotti ever earned the nickname. Federal investigators were equally frustrated. They knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. But knowing and proving are different currencies in the American justice system. Barnes operated in the gap between suspicion and evidence. Barnes maintained an operational distance. He avoided direct handling of street-level sales and limited his personal exposure, though prosecutors still developed recorded and documentary evidence tying him to the enterprise. The perfect insulation of a chairman who understood delegation. The peak arrived around 1976. Barnes is 43 years old, richer than he ever imagined, more powerful than any black drug dealer in American history. The council is humming. The pipeline is flowing. The police are helpless. The community is loyal. Everything he built from that prison cell conversation has materialized beyond his wildest projections. He's untouchable. He tells himself this. He tells everyone this. He starts believing it so completely that he makes the mistake that destroys everything. June 1977. New York Magazine approaches Barnes for a profile. Most kingpins would refuse. Attention is danger. Visibility is risk. But Barnes isn't most kingpins. He spent years cultivating his public image. The parties, the outfits, the community presence. A magazine cover fits the narrative he's been building. So he agrees not just to an interview but to a photo shoot. The cover image burns into American consciousness. Barnes in a denim suit, red, white, and blue tie. Arms crossed, expression somewhere between confident and contemptuous. The headline in bold letters, Mr. Untouchable. A subhead explains what everyone already knew. This is Nicky Barnes. The police say he may be Harlem's biggest drug dealer, but they can't prove it. That's the taunt. Barnes is telling law enforcement, local and federal, that he has beaten them, that he is smarter, that they are incompetent, and that he will keep getting richer while they keep filing paperwork that goes nowhere. He posed for that cover like a man who had won, because in his mind he had won. The magazine hits newsstands and is sold out immediately. Everyone is talking about the black kingpin who flaunted his immunity on the cover of a major publication. The story spreads nationally. Wire services pick it up. Talk shows discuss it, preachers condemn it, politicians demand action, and one of those politicians sits in the Oval Office. President Carter sees the cover. The story goes that he holds it up in a meeting, face twisted with frustration. How is this possible? How is this man walking free? How is he mocking the United States government on a magazine cover while flooding American cities with poison? Carter reportedly orders the Attorney General to make Barnes a priority, not a local priority, but a federal priority. The full weight of the Justice Department focused on one man from Harlem. The task force assembles. DEA, FBI, IRS, and NYP. Deorganized crime units. Everyone who had been chasing Barnes separately is now working together. Wiretaps go up on every phone they can connect to the council. Surveillance teams follow council members around the clock. Informants get flipped with promises of reduced sentences. The pressure increases exponentially. Barnes has spent years evading local investigations, but he has never faced this. The entire federal apparatus is aimed at one target. His face is taped to bulletin boards and field offices across the country. The council starts cracking. Not Barnes directly. His insulation still holds, but the men around him are not as careful. Phone conversations get sloppy. Meetings happen in places with eyes. Money moves through channels that leave the trails. Federal agents do not need Barnes to touch product. They need to prove the organization exists. They use RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which was designed to take down the Italian Mafia and which is now being deployed against a black narcotics corporation for the first time. In January 1978, the indictments drop. Barnes and 12 associates are charged with running a continuing criminal enterprise. The continuing criminal enterprise charge carries mandatory life without parole. There are no plea deals, no reduced sentences. If convicted, Barnes dies in prison. The trial is a spectacle. The courtroom is packed every day. The media camp outside. Barnes arrives in his three-piece suits, maintaining the image even as the walls close in. But the evidence is overwhelming. Wiretaps play his voice discussing shipments. Associates flip to save themselves. Financial records show the flow of millions. The jury does not take long. Guilty on all counts. January 28, 1978, sentencing. The judge imposes the maximum sentence, life without parole. Barnes stands in his tailored suit, face blank, absorbing the weight of infinity. He is 44 years old. He will never walk free again. Every dollar he made, every suit he wore, every party he threw, all of it leading to this concrete box. But here is where the story turns. Most men in Barnes's position would accept their fate, appeal endlessly, hold on to hope for a miracle, maintain the code, never cooperate with law enforcement under any circumstances. The Italian model Barnes studied emphasized this above all else. Omerta, silence unto death. You take your time, you protect your people, you die with your mouth closed. Barnes enters the federal prison system with these principles intact. For months, he stays quiet, does his time, maintains contact with council members still on the outside, expects loyalty in return. After all, he built this. He created wealth for everyone involved. He took the fall while others remained free. Surely they would take care of him. Surely they would maintain what he built. Surely they would honor the man who made them rich. But the council, the organization Barnes designed so carefully, has a flaw he never anticipated. It works too well without him. Guy Fisher rises to fill the vacuum. Fisher was always ambitious, always hungry. Now with Barnes locked away forever, Fisher sees opportunity. He takes control of the distribution network, takes control of the money, takes control of everything Barnes spent years building. And then he takes something else. Her name varies depending on the source. Some say Shemeka, some say it was a different woman. The details do not matter as much as the fact. Guy Fisher started a relationship with one of Barnes's women, not just any woman, a woman Barnes cared about deeply. While Barnes sits in a federal cell counting the days of a life sentence, his protege is living in his houses, driving his cars, sleeping in his bed, spending his money, and betting his woman. The visits stop, the money stops, the communication stops. Barnes, isolated in federal custody, pieces together what happened through fragments and rumors. The man he elevated, the man he trusted, the man who sat at his council table. That man has taken everything, not because Barnes is dead, because Barnes is irrelevant, locked away forever with no power to stop it. The betrayal burns hotter than the life sentence, burns hotter than losing the empire, burns hotter than anything Barnes has ever felt. Because this is not business. This is personal. This is disrespect of the highest order. This is everything the council was supposed to prevent. Loyalty, hierarchy, respect. All of it violated by the man who benefited most from Barnes's organization. Barnes makes a decision. If they will not honor what he built, he will destroy it. All of it. Every member, every associate, every dollar. He will take the organization he created and burn it to the ground using the one weapon he has left, information. In the early 1980s, Barnes began confidential cooperation with federal prosecutors and eventually entered witness protection and debriefing programs. The conversation is unprecedented. A convicted drug kingpin offering to cooperate, not to reduce a sentence already set at life without parole, but to exact revenge. Barnes wants to testify, wants to provide evidence, wants to name names, 109 names as it turns out. Every significant figure in the Harlem heroin trade, every council member, every lieutenant, every connection. The feds cannot believe it. This is the man who built the wall of silence they had spent years trying to penetrate. Now he is offering to knock it down himself. They accept immediately. Barnes enters witness protection and begins debriefing sessions that last months. Details flow like a river breaking through a dam. Organizational structures, supply routes, money laundering methods, murder conspiracies. Everything Barnes spent a decade building, he now spends months dismantling. The indictments follow like dominoes. Guy Fisher was later prosecuted under RICO and received a lengthy federal sentence. Frank James received a life sentence. Wally Rice received decades in federal prison. Thomas Foreman, Joseph Hayden. One by one, the council falls. Associates fall. Street-level dealers fall. The entire network Barnes constructed is systematically prosecuted using the testimony of its founder. Barnes takes the stand in trial after trial. He faces the men he once called partners. He looks them in the eyes and describes their crimes in detail. The defense attorneys try everything. They attack his credibility, call him a liar, a snitch, a man without honor. Barnes does not flinch. He is not there for justice. He is not there for redemption. He is there for destruction. And destruction is exactly what he delivers. The Harlem heroin trade does not recover for years. The organizational model Barnes imported from the Italian Mafia collapses almost overnight. No one trusts anyone. Every potential partner could be a future witness. The cooperation spreads paranoia through the drug world like a virus. If Nicky Barnes could flip, anyone could flip. The code meant nothing. 1998. After nearly 2 decades of cooperation, Barnes walks out of federal custody. New name, new identity, new life somewhere in Middle America. The government that once hunted him now protects him. The Kingpin becomes a ghost. The next 14 years are silence. Barnes disappears completely. No interviews, no sightings, no confirmation he is even alive. The man who once demanded attention, who posed for magazine covers, who threw parties that stopped traffic, erases himself entirely. The greatest vanishing act in organized crime history. 2012. Leroy Nicky Barnes dies. Cancer takes him in an undisclosed location. The government does not announce it. The media does not know. The streets hear nothing. The man who was Mr. Untouchable dies utterly alone, utterly anonymous, utterly forgotten by the world that once could not stop talking about him. 2019. 7 years after his death, the news finally breaks. Reporters piece together that Barnes has been gone for years. The king of Harlem died and nobody noticed. Nobody mourned. Nobody even knew. Think about that. A man who controlled hundreds of millions in illegal narcotics, who built an organization that dominated an entire city's drug trade, who posed on magazine covers and taunted the federal government, who brought down more drug dealers than any informant in history. That man died in obscurity, and the world did not find out until 7 years later. The Harlem he ruled is different now. The heroin corners are gone or transformed. The council exists only in court transcripts and federal archives. The empire he built and then destroyed left no heirs, no successors, no legacy except cautionary tales told in documentaries and law school classrooms. Nicky Barnes, from 147th Street to $75 million to a prison cell to a witness stand to a grave nobody can find. The man who learned organization from the Italian Mafia and applied it to Black Harlem. The man who proved that structure beats chaos. The man who proved that ego beats structure. The first black godfather and the last of his kind. Because after Nicky Barnes, nobody would ever trust the council model again. 1 magazine cover, 1 life sentence, 109 names on a list. That's how empires end.